Just thought I'd do a little chat on self-control. This is what my sovereignty course is all about. All the teaching I do is about this, actually, the sovereignty course specifically. But there's a great line from Rumi where he says, children ask for candy, he says, children ask for candy, but the intelligent search for self-control. So when we're going out there just trying to accumulate material things, we're looking for candy. When we aim for self-control, we're looking to align and connect to essence. And someone was saying to me recently, someone emailed me and said, well, you should talk a little bit about control of the palate and stuff like that, because I don't think people realise how essential that is, how important it is. And as I'm developing more and more and connecting to more and more, I realise even more how important it is. Because most people in the world are looking for more, but they're not building the infrastructure to take more. They want to connect to the miraculous, but they're not even able to handle the mundane. They're kind of 60 watt light bulbs and they want to access 1,000 watts, which would just completely blow them. So this whole concept of self-control is saying that I recognise that I've got a physical body, but the physical body is not me. I recognise I've got a sensual body. Most people are controlled by the sensual body, by their senses. I've got a sensual body, but it's not me. I recognise that I've got a mind, and the mind can be expansive, and the mind can be heaven, it can be hell. It can make a heaven out of hell, it can make a hell out of heaven, to quote Milton. But the mind isn't me. I recognise that I've got an egoic voice, and the egoic voice changes according to the environment and according to the pressures and according to the mores and according to the circumstance. But the egoic voice is not me. I'm also aware above that there is an observer. There is something in me watching, observing. I think they call it the watcher, or Eckhart Tolle calls it the observer. And I'm aware that behind that there is something that I exist inside of, and that exists inside of me. So all of theology tends to agree on the same thing, that if we want to be a conduit for essence, we need to have a gold-lined, righteous conduit. It needs to be gold on the inside. I think in the Old Testament they called it the ark, or the tabernacle. So we need to make sure we have a conduit with integrity. So if I was to suddenly get access to miraculous energy, but I didn't know who I was, and I hadn't got control of my sensual body, and I hadn't got control of my mind, and I didn't understand the many different egoic voices and the many different sub-personalities, the energy might come through, and I might initially have the right intent, but where's it going to end up? Who's it going to end up with? If it ends up with one of my uncontrollable sensual bodies, I might end up wreaking havoc with it. You know, if it ends up with a greedy subpersonality or an angry subpersonality, if it ends up with a judgmental or a violent subpersonality, that energy is going to come through and people are going to get massively damaged. So the idea of self-control is massively important. Control of the self is more powerful than control over 10,000 armies. And of course it literally is, because we have 100 billion cells in our body. Each of them are led by our perception. But 95% of our perceptions are unconscious. So 95% of the time we have wrong leaders in charge of our body. 100 trillion cells can go out into the world and do a lot of good or a lot of damage. It can breathe love or it can breathe hate. It can be the Messiah or it can be the Satan, depending on who's in charge at this time when it comes through. I know in my early days I used to use my essence, because I was working from a fearful subpersonality, to really damage people, to really hurt people. These days, because I know who I am, I'm able to bring that through a righteous conduit, through a controlled self. So I've got control of the physical body, control of the sensual body, control of the mind body, and I'm expanding that all the time. And I have a sentinel egoic voice, control of the egoic body, so that when this energy comes through, I recognise that I am a servant of this energy. that I am a servant of Logos, that I have control and I'm able to deliver that as a caretaker. So the caretaker, which is the name of my book, of course, means is the old word for man. Man meant steward, a steward or a caretaker. We are the inlet and outlet of infinite energy. We are the inlet and outlet of divine energy. So if we start accessing this massive amount of energy, you know, some will call it the Kundalini energy. If that comes through and we haven't got a very, very strong will, and that will isn't, if our knowledge and our energy isn't connected to a very strong and righteous will, it will go out and create massive damage to us and massive damage to other people. If you get a chance to read anything by Gopi Krishna, he does a lot on Kundalini. I think he calls it the essential energy of man. And he talks about the danger of accessing energy before we have a strong enough conduit. Because obviously this energy that we're aiming to achieve is obviously looking for us. It wants, you know, this energy that we're looking for is looking for us. It wants a conduit to come through. But we can't ignore the fact that this spiritual energy is hugely powerful, and it can create and destroy realities. But it needs to come through a biology. It needs to come through this physical body, through this sensual body, through this sympathetic nervous system. It has to come through my cognition, my perception. My brain and my body practically has to rewire itself in order to take the capacity of this new energy. It's a very, very physical thing. And I've nearly been, you know, I had about 2 or 3 years where I was completely burnt out by accessing too much energy too soon, or accessing more energy than my body could cope with. I had to go away and rest and take time and allow my body to recalibrate, because I just didn't have the capacity to take it through. So the romantic idea of accessing this Kundalini energy, or this essence, is really nice. But what we're actually asking for is 1000 watts to come through a 60 watt white light bulb. It will just blow. Literally it will. I mean, that's why lots of people end up in mental asylums and end up ill or damaged or burnt out or hugely dangerous, because they access more energy than they have the control, they access more energy than they have the ability to control. That's why the caretaker, all the time in the caretaker, the character who is represented by me, is saying, when I ask for more than I'm ready for, please pretend you didn't hear me. Don't give it me till I'm ready. When I ask for the, you know, the reward without the work, or for the, you know, for the medal without doing the race, or for the armor without fighting the battle, or for the intelligence and the wisdom without actually traversing the journey, pretend you didn't hear me. Please let me build and grow organically so that I can take this massive energy that is represented by Logos or Essence or Kundalini or God, whatever you want to call it. I like the word Logos. I think it's a great word. So when we talk about control of the palate, we develop an iron will through control of palate, or we develop an iron will and a wisdom through control and expansion of mind, and we obtain wisdom and power by electing a sentinel voice and having control of that sentinel voice, and being able to make ourselves do the things that we're afraid to do and stop ourselves from doing the things that we are unable to do, stop ourselves from doing the things that are detrimental to us and others. When we can have control of that sensual body, when we can have control of the physiological body, you know, like the sympathetic nervous system, which we learn through, you know, the martial arts and through warriorship. The warrior book I wrote is very good for this. When we get control of that, we create a very powerful conduit for energy. It isn't peripheral to the spiritual journey. It's actually preparing the body, preparing the mind, preparing the biology and the physiology to access a greater source of energy. It's rewiring ourselves. It's massively essential. In the terms of biblical stories, it's like the story of Noah. We build an ark because there's going to be a rush of storm, there's going to be a cleansing, there's going to be a flood, and that represents the Kundalini energy. So we build an ark or an eye wall or a righteous place, and we stay inside of it, or a covenant. We agree to live a righteous life or an aligned life, so that when this storm of energy comes through, we're able to sit in the middle of it and not be affected by it, not be damaged or burnt out by it. Control of the physical body, control of the sensual body, control of the mind body and expansion of the mind body, control of the egoic body, recognition of an intuitive or subtle body, and above that a super soul or the collective universe, recognizing that we are the inlet and the outlet for an infinite amount of energy, is hugely important. It's hugely important. I've lost count of the amount of times I've spent hours and hours with people talking to them about why palate is so important, why control of the sensual body and control of our addictions and killing our addictions and dissolving our old core beliefs, why it's so important, why expansion of the mind and the intellect is so important. It's because we're preparing ourselves, we're building an ark for a bigger energy, and everything that isn't inside that ark is going to get washed away and destroyed. So it's hugely important to align ourselves with these things, to get the palette right. Gandhi said that when we get control of the palette, he said all the senses fall into alignment. When the senses fall into alignment, we have control of the self. When we have control of the self, we have control of the world. It was what he felt was the most essential thing. It was the one thing that most people can't get. They can't get control of their palate, because control of the palate is controlling the central body. It's a recognition of a hierarchy. It's saying that the physical and sensual and mind and egoic body are separate. Or they are separate with most people. If we can align them to a higher course, to a divine CEO, or to an intuitive direction, or to an intuitive purpose, we become masters of ourselves. Then we become perfect conduits. Then we become servants for a divine force. And in surrendering to that potential, we become that potential. And then the whole concept of the 5 separate bodies doesn't exist anymore. There's no longer a hierarchy. The hierarchy is just really there as a demonstration to say, we are disparate, we're divided against ourselves. This is about aligning ourselves to be the perfect conduit for a divine purpose, or for a divine force, for a massive force. So it's hugely important that we have control of those desires, we have control of those addictions, we have control of those temptations. We can temper ourselves on those. So we go to the vices and we use the vices as a tempering tool. When we don't succumb to the vices, we expand and muscularize, or strengthen. Is there a word called muscularize? I don't think there is. I think I may have just made a word up. But we strengthen the virtue, and when we have a virtuous conduit, we are the perfect vehicle for massive amounts of energy. So it's hugely important. Self-control is very, very important. And I'm 54 now. I'm still working on that. And it's taken me a long time just to get the intellect and the expanded awareness or consciousness just to understand why that's important. So it's important now for me to tell the story and say to people, don't think that you can go on this massive trek and not be in shape. It's really important that if you want to have access to a greater power, that you have control of the vehicle that it's going to come through, or the conduit that it's going to come through. You need to have control of that. Otherwise you're going to get all that stuff to the detriment of everything else. What's the use of the whole world if you've lost your soul? What's the use of the whole world if you've lost your integrity with your wife, your children, your workers, your friends? What's the use of having all of that material stuff, all of those accolades, all of that money, all of those riches? What's the point of having all that if you've lost everything that's important to you, which is your ability to serve from a place of love? What's the point of having all that stuff? You'll have it and just feel absolutely and unequivocally corrupted by it. So you can't measure it by material success. We measure it by the amount of love we're able to bring to other people. So if I am a a tabernacle or a portable essence for a portable vehicle for essence, then I need to know why I've got that and why that's there. Why am I a conduit? Why am I a portable tabernacle? Why am I a tabernacle or a portable vehicle for essence? So that I can give it to other people, so that I can serve other people. What else is there? The greatest joy I have is not in acquiring things, but in giving them away and moving them on. You know, letting the energy move through me and processing the energy and then passing it on. That's the joy. The joy is creating to serve other people. And when we serve other people, it massively serves us. It can't not. I can't give it to you without processing it in me. That's why the tree is the story of the tree is where the caretaker comes from. It's saying the tree is a perfect business model. The tree is a perfect model for life. Because everything it takes in, it gives out, and it builds a huge infrastructure for that. It's not frightened of energy. It's not frightened of the exchange of energy. And it holds on to nothing. It works in unity. It's absolute. Everything it brings in, it processes, it gives out again. It's a cyclical thing. It doesn't demand autonomy from everything. It recognises that in serving other people, it serves itself. It gives freely to everybody. No discrimination. No judgment. If you're a killer or a holy saint, it will feed you. So self-control is basically just getting a very strong, aligned conduit with integrity, which means no breaks. There's no breaks in it. If there's breaks in the integrity, there's leaks of essence. If there's leaks of essence, we attract darkness. We become disciples for death. So we have to align ourselves. We have to get rid of those corruptions, get rid of those where there's a break in the integrity. We have to be gold lined. If you look at the tabernacle in the Bible, gold lined. Don't think of this as being religious in the sense of dogma. This is just a parable to say that you are a conduit for divine energy. If you want to access lots of energy, then know why you're doing it and know how to be a great conduit. Starts with self-control, and self-control always starts with palate. It's the one thing that nearly everybody can't get. If you can get that, you put yourself into the smallest percentage straight away. It'll have a huge effect. And just the act of getting your palette cleaned will start the cleansing of all your cells, start the cleansing of all your old shadows, and you'll start to process lots of old scripts. I would say it's the most important thing you can do. It's the first lesson I teach on my sovereignty course. Even to the point where we bring a specialist dietitian in, Dean Coulson, to talk to people about the power of palate. It's hugely important. It's the first step, but it's hugely important.